Good morning, Nigeria, and welcome to today's newspaper review. I'll be taking you through this segment. First, we'll start with the Matrix newspaper. On the Matrix newspaper, there's excitement as Oyo school adoptees has been rescued yesterday. So the social media has been filled with a lot of excitement because finally the Oyo school children has been rescued. Then at the top of the same newspaper, airport parking incident. Aviation Minister punctures Obi's claims, demands apology, fine payment. He has threatened to order FAN to take further action if Peter Obi does not apologize. Still in the same newspaper, in the middle of the newspaper, Fubara presents 1.854 trillion naira budget to Rivers Assembly. Then in the middle of the same newspaper, on 2027, Tinubu retains Shatima as running mate, repeats Muslim ticket. You know that the APC, they've been wondering if President Bola Ahmed Tinubu will still retain his vice. And of course, the president has still retained his vice, the vice president Shatima, as his running mate. And then APC, we are working together to build a more prosperous, secured and inclusive Nigeria for all. So the APC say that they are working together to build a more prosperous and inclusive Nigeria for everyone. So we move away from that newspaper to the Vanguard newspaper. On the Vanguard newspaper, on page 26, finally, Oyo pupils, teachers rescued. Finally, the Oyo school pupils and teachers have been rescued. This is the latest headlines on our newspapers today. So virtually all the newspapers carry this particular headline. Then by the right side of the newspaper on page 6, in Lagos State, tankers bring Apapa to a standstill. Still in the same newspaper, the Presidential Foreign Intervention Promotion Council, that's PFIPC scandal. They said how Senate block probe of 1.3 trillion naira undefended budget. You get the full story on page 30 of the newspaper. The Senate has blocked the probe of 1.3 billion naira undefended budget. Still in the same newspaper, at the foot of that newspaper, in insecurity, the European Union Parliament condemns killing in Middle East. The full story is on page 25 of the newspaper. We move away from that newspaper to the Daily Independent. On the Daily Independent on page 3, the lead page says Tinubu promises justice for beheaded Oyo teacher, praise Makinde over rescue of abducted pupils. Recall one of the teachers that was beheaded. The president has promised justice for the teacher. Then at the top of the same newspaper on page 1 of the newspaper, Nigerians are calling on Gowon, Obasanjo, Babangida and others to intervene in proposed NYSC reforms. Then at the bottom of the same newspaper on page 6, FCCPC floors airpeace over ticket pricing. The FCCPC floors airpeace over ticket pricing. Then on page 8 of the same newspaper, Nigeria's 28 million invisible children without legal identity. We move away from that newspaper to the Daily Sun. On the Daily Sun newspaper on page 4 and page 5, how joint forces rescued Oyo kids, killed and arrested kidnappers. The follow-up story says Tinubu orders medical support for victims. Makinde excited, and he says it is a big relief to him. Then the APC, the APM, Afenifere, MBF, Lounge Security Agencies, Psychologists Council, Federal Government. Still in the same newspaper, at the top of that same newspaper, on public finance, Atiku slams president over audit bill. The full story is on page 25 of the newspaper. Then on page 16 of the newspaper, this is coming from the Nollywood actress, that's Bolaji Ogunmola, she says that a man's kindness attracts her and not his physical appearance. So if you feel that you're physically attractive, that you attract this Nollywood actress Bolaji, she says that it is a man's kindness that attracts her and not the physical appearance. Then at the bottom of the same newspaper on page 25, on 2027, Tinubu sticks with Shettima as running mate. Then on page 14 and page 15 of the same newspaper, why I set 1.4 billion naira humanitarian agenda for Rotary District 9111. This is coming from Bukola Bakore, that's Director General of the Rotary. We'll move away from that newspaper to the Nigerian Tribune. On the Nigerian Tribune, joy erupts in Oyo as abducted pupils, teachers regain freedom after 56 days in captivity. The full story is on page 3 of the same newspaper. Then at the top of the newspaper, this is from Oyo to Osun boundary clash. I shot Shegun dead, but it was in self-defense. Suspected killer admits. The full story is on page 10 of the newspaper. Then at the bottom of the newspaper, APM will reset Nigeria, says national chairman. The APM national chairman says that they will reset Nigeria. We'll move away from that newspaper to the Punch newspaper. On the Punch newspaper, Oyo abduction, inside operation that freed pupils, teachers after 56 days in captivity. The full story is on page 4 of the newspaper. Then at the bottom of the same newspaper on page 20 and page 21, deadly trust, unregulated workforce where domestic workers kill employees. The full story is on page 20 and page 21 of the same newspaper. Still in the same newspaper on page 7, this is coming from Seyi Makinde, the Oyo State Governor. He says that he'll reject any electoral fraud. That's what the governor of Oyo State says, that he will reject any electoral fraud. Then this is coming from the South African returnee, Tohila. He said, I wept, begged for my life as South African pointed gun at me. One of the returnees said that he begged and then wept for his life because the South African pointed gun at him. Away from that newspaper to the Guardian. On the Guardian newspaper, 56 days in hell over for Oyo children and teachers. The full story is on page 2 of the newspaper. Then on page 26 of the newspaper at the top, celebrating a life of service and vision as Pastor Folu Adeboye clocks 78 years old. The wife of the Redeemed Christian Church of God, pastor's wife, she just turned 78 years, and she says she's celebrating a life of service and vision. Then at the bottom of the same newspaper on page 2, procurement reform saved Nigeria over 1.1 trillion naira, says Shettima. The vice president says that the procurement reform saved Nigeria from 1.1 trillion naira. We'll move away from that newspaper to our last newspaper for today, the Daily Trust. On the Daily Trust newspaper, the lead page says, mandate hijack, how 16 MDAs got 206 billion naira for constituency projects. The story is on page 4 of the same newspaper. Then on page 9 of the newspaper, 2027, Tinubu to run with Shettima. On page 8 of the same newspaper, kidnappers arrested as abducted Oyo pupils rescued. We've come to the end of the newspaper review. Many thanks for watching. I am Cassie Tony, and do have a beautiful weekend.